Bismillah wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to another episode of the Middle West podcast. I'm your host, Taqid Musa, and I'm joined today by my co-host, Asad Hussain.
Assalamu alaikum.
And Abdul Sami Al-Jamand.
Assalamu alaikum.
As well as a guest, Abdullah Saif.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone.
So we're joining you from Solihull today, just outside Birmingham, and Abdullah Saif, who is Birmingham-based, is going to tell us a little bit about his life, a little bit about this project on a book that he's working on, as well as his various illustrious, industrious, like limitless ventures that he's done. So Abdullah, I've heard that you're a superhero by night, but by day you're a solicitor.
Well, I pretend to be. If you had an accident in the last 3 years, it wasn't your fault. Slip, trip, or fall. I'm your guy.
This is him dropping in that.
It clearly is. This is a sponsored podcast, by the way.
Did you do personal injury claims?
So
although Abdullah gave us no money, so
yeah.
But we'll see you after that. Afterwards for that.
Yeah, I work for a small firm. We do part of what we do is personal injury claims, and I deal in that department.
So if I got injured at work, can I go to you?
At work, on the road.
Well, Abdul Sami, you have to do some work in order to claim an injury.
Allah.
It's happening.
Going to collect your benefits and he slips on a banana peel.
Then you probably have a claim.
I fell down and I was walking up to the job centre.
That's one, yeah, as well, yeah. Fantastic.
But sorry, please continue.
Well, it's always nice to talk about yourself. I don't know what to say. I'm Brummie born and bred.
Some say you're the jack of all trades.
And master of none.
Master of all.
Will some others say he's the master of all trades?
Master of all trades.
MashaAllah.
So Asad's studying international law and criminal
I graduated
management.
last year in law. I'm doing a master's now in international law and security.
LLM, right?
I just realised I called it criminal management.
Criminal management, though. I'd love to do that as well. Send me.
I didn't LLM at Birmingham Uni, International Law and Human Rights.
Did you?
Yeah, I didn't do anything with it. But it was nice to kind of break away from...
Then did you do LPC afterwards?
No, I did my LPC before. And I did it part-time. And it was just to kind of scratch an itch, basically. That I liked human rights, the theory of it and stuff like that. I like the theory of it. Yeah.
Those random human rights.
But to be honest, it was more that they did a module on legal responses to terrorism, and with the whole kind of securitization of the Muslim community and the whole prevent agenda and all that kind of stuff. And I dipped my finger in a bit of, my toe at least, in a bit of stuff, to do with government prevent and stuff like that. So I thought I'd get the academic side in to see what that's about.
So we learned about that as well, but we learned on a more like macro scale. So in terms of like the state going to, not war, we wouldn't say war, against non-state actors, and the legality behind it, and there's quite a few grey areas in it as well, because you can't, like, technically the laws used to govern law and armed conflicts, they don't apply to groups to a certain way, and like Bush pushed that, so it's called the Bush Doctrine now, where he applied it to non-state.
You're way over my head now. I'm lost.
There's glaze over his eyes.
All this legal jargon.
So are you trying to say that initially, for example, the war on terror was kind of illegal, but then it was made legal?
Well, you look at the war on terror, you have to look at the events beforehand. So the war on terror, what happened beforehand. So
well, you gotta contextualize it. Wolfowitz, I think after 9/11, he says we can't decontextualize this. Basically, history starts from now, basically from 9/11, and you're like, yeah, that's not how history works, And so that's part of an agenda that they had, no doubt. But yeah,
they being the Western government,
Illuminati.
Yeah.
Illuminati.
The powers that be.
They who don't want you to succeed.
Yeah. I see the Voldemorts.
He who cannot be named.
They. Yeah, so they've obviously, clearly there's an agenda, and just stepping back and looking at Venezuela now and all that kind of stuff.
When you look at it as let's say as a student or even a lawyer or an academic, you can't do anything about it. Like, it's fun to look at it and argue about it, but then you don't have any power in your hands.
The thing is,
we could say America committed war crimes. We could say that America went to war on false premises. But what's that going to do with us? Nothing, because nothing's going to happen to America, is it?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the international law works on consent, basically, that states kind of just agree that this is how they're going to play ball. But when you got the big show, America kind of just saying, yeah, that's not how we're going to do things.
An example of this is like in the 1980s, there's a case called Nicaragua.
Oh wow,
like your coffee.
Yeah, like my coffee.
So Nicaragua, America sponsored a non-state armed group called the Contras to basically, it was a rebel
It was a
group
coup,
against the government, to coup the government, and the weapons and etc. that the support that America gave, the Contras used it, but they committed a lot of war crimes like burning entire villages with Apache helicopters and stuff like that. So they were brought to the ICJ by Nicaragua, the International Court of Justice. And even though every single domino fell, like America satisfies every criteria to what they shouldn't do, America refused to acknowledge the judgment, and it just goes on. So you're guilty in everything, but then how do you enforce it?
No one's powerful enough to punish you, basically.
How do you force it? Because the international law is not a
They
centralized
just said
system.
they don't recognise the international court.
But then
criminal court.
the question that rises, like kind of trying to make it relate to modern times, is a lot of the weapons that, for example, various countries, including the Americans, gave in the Syrian conflict, etc. They presumably ended up in some wrong hands and some war crimes were committed, etc.
Yeah, exactly. But the problem is when wars are going on, it's very hard to make a picture of it. Legal action tends to happen after wars are finished, because you can see the effects of the war then.
Yeah, that's why, like Serbian war, etc. They only just tried the last few people in the last couple of years.
I think the other thing that's interesting about that is also the idea of, you're saying that's the centralizing of international courts. So, for example, at least that was done with the European Courts of Justice, and because how unified Europe is, it's, I think, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I would understand that it would be so much more easier to prosecute Serbia, or at least those who are responsible.
Like with Serbia, it was an international affair. So the ICTY, the International Criminal Tribunal, the former Yugoslavia, was made to govern that. There were war crimes for people, individuals,
Not state.
not states.
Yes,
The states were brought to the
yes.
International Court of Justice.
But Serbia,
Sorry.
the Serbian government, as a state entity, as a governmental entity, still got off the hook.
Yes, it was mainly the
Well, Yugoslavia got
individuals.
split up, so
So you can't prosecute anyone because that government doesn't exist.
Well, the Serbian government does exist,
the Serbian does, yeah.
but that's
Yeah.
what the tribunal is called, of the former Yugoslavia.
Okay, and that's why they're going after individuals like generals. And
So the first case to be seen in the ICTY was a case called Tadic. This is a low-ranking general in the Serbian army, and he wasn't a big shot, but essentially what they did was they wanted to show that they're going after everybody by bringing this low-ranking general in for his participation in some kind of in war camps.
So there's that's quite an interesting little tangent there.
Yeah, it's an interesting world out there, man. I mean, the players out there. I mean, everyone who's kind of calling the shots is effectively has a veto on what can happen to them. So
It's
you know,
amazing.
it's completely messed up.
Something I'm a bit more interested in knowing is, because you were saying how part of what your work was when you were doing your degree, you started talking a bit about foreign policy or counterterrorism policy. Sorry, specifically with Prevent. You were doing a lot of work with across that. During your lectures, of course, you know, alhamdulillah, now you see Prevent being vilified by almost every single person, including academics, to, you know, police chief superintendents. Back then, so while you're studying, how much of like critiques, like how much debate was there when going through Prevent amongst lecturers, and even though you guys was like, while you guys were studying it, were there any like times where lecturers themselves were saying that, you know, how this is a bit of a flawed kind of concept, Prevent and whatnot?
Well, the good thing about that particular module, I mean, I only did this in 2013, 2014, so I did part-time, so it was over that period, so it's not that long ago, although a lot of literature and a lot of kind of stuff has come out since then. But he was Irish from Northern Ireland, and he kind of had, you know, my dissertation at the end of it was a comparison between the suspect communities of Northern Ireland and the Muslim community, and so, you know, there was, but now obviously there's a lot more critique of Prevent. But at the time, there was only a few of us in there, but I was the only one in there who had kind of some kind of like street level action when it comes to Prevent. So I've been involved in Young Muslim Advisory Group. So we set up in 2008. Yeah, 2008 to kind of advise the British government on young Muslim affairs. It was a talk shop really, but it was kind of, I was early 20s, I was 21.
Yeah, but did you accept government money though?
Did we accept government money? they paid for like hotels and stuff. I didn't get paid, stuff like it was,
So,
it was.
So you're government sponsored then?
It was a government sponsored. It was under the Labour government then.
Yes.
Yeah,
The good guys.
The good guys.
good
Friend.
Although they were the people who actually initially initiated the concept of prevent. Not many people.
Yeah, absolutely. No, they kind of set up the whole counter-terrorism strategy contest, as it still is known, and they kind of sold it to the world really, and they became the ones who sold it out, but and started the whole kind of industry, as it were. But YMAG itself, as it was on, it's no longer. It was disbanded. So we kind of, you're young. Everyone, the average age of everyone there was probably about 18 or 19, maybe, and so it was just kind of. It was kind of a new thing, and everyone was quite excited. And then it was. This was, I think, it was in October, and then in December 2008. Yeah, and then 2008, 2009, there was the Gaza massacre. Remember, the big one. And then we thought, hey, we got the ear of some ministers. Let's write a letter out to, who was it then? It was Gordon Brown, Prime Minister then. And then we sent a letter out. Spent ages drafting it, sent it out, and then we got told off, saying, "Oi, who do you think you are?"
By who? So from your CIA handlers, or
No, literally, like there was like civil servants, and there was an outside management company who OPM is called, Office of Public Management. It was just some company that wins contracts from government departments to run all these kind of things. And but civil servants and a few ministers, they were like, "Hey, you're overstepping your mark." And we're like, "What mark?" We're kind of defining this role for ourselves. We got a lot of support from the Muslim community. In fact, I think we were one of the first to send a letter out, a public one, asking for the government to do more, to hold back the Zionist state. You get me? And the MCB then pushed out a statement and all that kind of stuff. And your neighbour had a lot of primetime TV coming out of that. That was an interesting kind of period. And then we got told off by the current London mayor, who came to one of this retreat saying, "Listen, you need to."
Who was the mayor at the time?
Sorry,
Who was
the current one.
the current one?
The current London
Sadiq
mayor,
Khan.
Sadiq Khan. Yeah. He came, and he was kind of like the public figure, you know what I mean, of Muslims engaging in politics and stuff. And so,
Well, he
kind of
still
gave
is, but
Have you seen that video where he's in India?
Sajid Javid, were you on about? He's the Home Secretary.
yes, that's
Who
true.
Trump's
He's from my town, Sadiq Javid. Rochdale, he's born.
Sajid Javid is
Sajid
Sadiq
Javid.
Javid, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, his brother's he works for West Midlands Police. They look exactly the same. None of them have hair.
Wow.
Yeah. He got an award recently for something, but yeah, he's quite high up. So yeah, the humble beginnings of bus drivers and factory workers, man. You get me, mashallah. Yeah. But anyway, we can sit here all day talking about them and what we think of them. But just a tangent to kind of some of the work that we're doing in that prevent kind of industry, as it were. But we, like I said, we were naive and I think they went behind the ears, as it were, and the glitz and the glam of the access and all that kind of stuff.
Do you think like the momentum kind of died down over time with the group? Because I think a problem with young people is they have a lot of passion at the beginning, and over time when they start realizing.
You say that like you're a bit old or something. Like the problem with these young people.
No, I mean I'm saying myself
true.
as well.
Yeah.
The organisations we work for as well have a big problem with momentum, keeping things going.
The thing is, this is well. To be honest, I don't know what the funding was, but it was well structured, it was well organised, it was managed, and so there was a lot of support. They even kind of employed someone to kind of be kind of like a youth coordinator for us and stuff. Really top guy from Blackburn. Is it Blackburn? I think so. Lovely guy. And but yeah, so they kind of kept that momentum going. If a few people dropped out because of studies or whatever it is, or then they kind of replaced them with someone else. But it was representational. And at least it was selective. It wasn't elective, but people from all over, from northwest to northeast. A few from Birmingham.
So you said it's selective. So how do they go about?
There was
people?
Yeah, there was at the time there was like some advert of some kind. It was passed to me by, I can't remember who it was. I applied, and then they said come to the residential, and then turn up at residential, and then from there was about 30 odd of us, 30 something or so people, maybe more, maybe less, and then from them they selected about 20, and that's how it worked. And then you just got a message saying you've made it, come to London, and
And then you got wined and dined and.
Completely voluntary role.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so was that like your first kind of interaction with kind of activism or getting involved with
Nationally,
representing the community?
if you want to call it that. There was no representation. I mean, you had a representative role, but I guess it was nationally the first time. I'd been involved in kind of programs prior to that in 2006. In fact, it's still running now. The first Oxford Centre for Islamic Studies Young Muslim Leadership Program.
Yeah, I think I'm assuming you've been to that,
Have
right?
you been to that?
No, I haven't. I've applied twice and I've been rejected twice.
Oh no!
Allahu
I'm going to apply again.
Make it happen. So
Maybe if you got a job.
Yeah. No, I didn't have a job. I was still at uni. So this was in 2006, and that was the first one. And so that was my first exposure to something like that. And it was 2 weeks off, completely at the expense of Oxford Centre for Islamic Studies and I think the Prince's Trust, who was the patron. And they kind of just put you in the hallowed halls of Oxford. Was it Christ Church College? You go around. It's just brilliant. To the people there, we're still friends with a few of them. I just met a few of them a few days ago, actually. People all over the place. One of them is now one of the most influential people in the Muslim, that 500 list. So he's doing well for himself, and a few others are doing this and that.
Is he the Muzmaj guy?
Is he in the list?
Muzmaj might
He's
made
made the
it.
list.
I think, yeah.
No, it's not him. It's not him.
Okay.
He's made it.
Yeah, we should bring him on the podcast.
One of my mates said on Twitter recently, he said, I'm going to count every day that I don't have a wife starting from today, day 2. And then one of my other mates said to Muzmaj, Muzmaj, go help this guy out. And they go, we can't work miracles.
Oh, wow.
They're becoming really active on Twitter.
That's so cool.
That's
But they have some great advertising. Sorry, anyways.
Yeah. So that's it, really. I mean, what else do you want to...
So, so we're just kind of... Because I know in Birmingham, you're kind of all over the place, so...
Yeah, so I run around pretty much like a headless chicken, really. And there, there's not that much strategy. To be honest, there is, and the only strategy really is that by the end, when you keel over and die, that you've had enough people say he helped me or he did something for me. That maybe that counts towards something. That's all it really
that's
is.
a really positive attitude in that, sometimes we kind of get bogged down with perfectionism and we need to get everything right and the structure needs to be there and someone needs to be employed and someone needs to be full-time. Whereas if you just get on with it and you just
do it.
Just do it and get something done. At least you have something rather than just waiting around for the formal structures and all that.
I mean, there's an argument against it and saying, listen, you got to specialize, you got to go down that route. And my dad's a huge kind of advocate of that, and it just probably just doesn't suit me. Just to kind of help someone with some minor thing there. You know what it is? I was listening to a talk the other day, and it kind of summed up why I think I do it, but now I can at least verbalize it. I think to myself, internalize it a bit. That there's a lot of stresses that you go through, whether it's at work, it's family, or whatever it is. And maybe I'm using this as an excuse, but we procrastinate sometimes. We kind of put something off. But when you're in the thick of stress and a problematic situation, and someone comes to you with a problem themselves, the natural position is to kind of say, listen, I've got my own stuff to deal with, can you push me away? And you push them away, or you kind of tell them, listen, I can't help you out right now. But then you reflect on the statement of the Prophet ﷺ, who said, whoever removes the hardship from his belief, from a fellow Muslim, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala removes hardships from them. And if you look at it in that way, it's probably those people coming to you is probably a godsend. It's you know what I mean. It's a way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saying, okay, I know you need help in this situation, this particular case that you're going through, this particular thing that you're dealing with, this family situation, and someone's come to you, and you push them off, and subhanallah, if you just kind of re-engage your intention a bit, maybe that it could be the thing that ends up taking away or helping you over that next hurdle that your own life is thrown at you. So. It's those kind of intentions, those kind of reasonings that perhaps you try to do as much as you can to as much people as possible, to as many people as possible.
Do you believe, for yourself, over time, this idea in your head has developed? Because a lot of time at the beginning, young people, when they start work, they just think, I want to do some good. They don't define what good is. They don't really have any tunnel vision.
Yeah.
They just say, I want to do good. And they see any odd activism program or volunteering initiative and they join it. Do you think that people stick to that long enough, they'll start developing this idea Islamically? I'm talking about Islamic youth at the moment. So for example, our organisations, UKM and MAB, a lot of people join at the beginning because they want to do good for the community. But do you feel as though we're lacking, as organisations, promoting this idea of if you help another, then maybe Allah is sending that as help for yourself?
Well, maybe I can't judge on every single person and what they're going through, but I think at the beginning it's very difficult, especially young people who are getting into activism. You don't want to box them in. You just want them to kind of get a feel for it, especially people who are kind of coming in. So I think just keeping that door open to them to kind of test out a few things, see where their passion lies, and just as long as that action, there's a good end result to it. You know, whether it's their own development, whether it's someone else they're helping out, that there's some positive, then you just let it happen, and maybe naturally it'll kind of help them formulate some kind of tunnel vision for themselves, saying, listen, I've tried this. Maybe this organisation isn't right for me, but, you know, this particular aspect of their work is right for me. I want to go to that. And so I think it's, although it's nice and it is needed, and we do need those people who kind of create those tunnel visions and make sure that there's a specific goal in mind that they're working towards, which hopefully will be for the benefit of the Ummah. For young activists, I think they need to be given the space to kind of just see what's out there, see where they can fit in, and there's got to be some nurturing along the way, and hopefully that kind of helps direct them a bit.
I think a lot of the problems with organisations today, I'm not ruling any organisations out as well, is that when they start building a volunteer base, they put a lot of stress and burden onto the volunteer base. So, for example, when you attend meetings, you have to do X, Y, and Z. If you miss this much, then you're out. If you do this, then you're out. They put a lot of it's more
percentages
like,
and things like that.
and it's kind of, it builds a kind of hierarchy between the leadership and the actual volunteers. And I think it's not healthy for an organisation.
I haven't personally in my activism, whatever you want to call it. I haven't experienced that. You know, there haven't been any kind of targets to set for meetings and stuff like that, and maybe that's why I'm a bit lax when it comes to my own roles and things like this. But I think that young people, it's very important for them, especially in this day and age where they can kind of just be pulled left, right, and centre to a number of different like things that won't be of benefit to them. That if they do come knocking on your door, or they are engaging in some of the things that we feel are beneficial, inshallah, then you just give them the space to kind of grow in it, or just to kind of take their own steps and not push them away. I think it's incredibly important.
Some very good advice, actually, especially when you mentioned the hadith. And I think many of the listeners can actually start benefiting when they have that kind of mindset. It kind of reminds me of the story of the cave, or there's many stories of the caves, but the specific one of the three young people when they were stuck in the cave, and each of them thought about a specific action that they had done that they knew was purely for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and, you know, slowly the cave had opened up basically for them. And kind of, based on that, I want to ask you a question, which is, I believe you are working on something currently, something to do with lessons of a specific prophet and how you can apply it towards today's context. So do you want to talk a bit about that? Or
yeah, I think that's your book, right? Musa alayhi salam, and how we can apply it to Muslims in the West.
This is something that I've been working on for a while, to be honest. I'm listening to a lot of talks about Musa alayhi salam, and I'm reading a lot of the verses about Musa alayhi salam. And I think it was in one i'tikaf, God knows how long ago it was now. But I was reading Surah Taha, and I was just kind of just rereading the story of Musa, and things just clicked in my head about taking the example of Musa alayhi salam and how it applies to us as Muslims in the West. And so I started writing, and I'm about 30 pages in. But it's a case of looking at the example, or looking at the experience of Muslims in the West through the lens of the story of Musa alayhi salam, in all its facets, mainly, specifically around his time in the house of Fir'aun. And so, to cut a long story short, it's really just about the marrying and drawing the parallels between Musa alayhi salam's experiences, growing up and moving to the house, with his birth and whatever it is, and moving to the house of Fir'aun, and what he got from that experience, and to what he later became, i.e. the Prophet, to that of the Muslims here in the West. And effectively it starts off by saying that, and this is a kind of general statement, that most of us came to the West, as it were, not by choice really, was it? I mean, most of us are either born here or their parents came because...
I chose to come here, but... Okay.
Yeah, again, based on generality. We don't base rules on exceptions, and you're the
Wow.
exception here. You know what I mean?
Can I just say, even though I was born here, I'm glad I was born here. I'm proud to be British, and just saying.
This is where you play the national anthem.
There's only one of the British one. I didn't get the hint.
In your book, you said you're writing the book about Musa's life, but
Yeah.
mainly focused on his time in the house of Fir'aun. Is it a descriptive book, or does it actually give lessons to learn from as well?
The idea is lessons. It's not descriptive. We know the story. I mean, if I was to go to any kind of madrasa or anywhere, or ISAC, wherever it is, and I spoke about Musa alayhi salam, just did a pop quiz, and you ask.
I mean,
they all know the answers.
descriptive, like in terms of you drawing analogies from Musa's story and applying it to the West. So you could say, for example, in Musa's story, this happens, and it happens here as well. But do you actually expand on that as well to give
So
lessons?
that's the idea. So so one of the examples, for example, is Musa alayhi salam having been placed in the house of Fir'aun, and you look at the language that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses about the placement of him there. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says two key phrases: وَاصْطَنَعْتُكَ لِنَفْسِي, I prepared you myself, effectively, وَلِتُصْنِعَ عَلَىٰ عَيْنِي, and so that you're reared under my watchful eye. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala kind of uses those phrases after, and he bookends a verse where he basically explains Musa's experience very quickly growing up in the house of Fir'aun, and how he was raised in his house, the house of an enemy, and how he killed someone, and how he left. And so it's as if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, this summary of your life is all part of my grand plan for you. I raised you under my watchful eye, and all this was part of a plan. And the idea is to kind of break down what it is that actually happened to Musa, and how it is that it helped him develop into becoming the prophet that he was destined to become. And so one of the things is, it draws analogies, it draws comparisons. So one of the comparisons made is that effectively the house of Fir'aun is the house of the West. And then you look at who Fir'aun is, or who he was, what he declared himself to be. Ana rabbukum al-a'la, I don't know any God that you should worship other than me. Alaysa li mulku Misra wa hadhihi al-anhar, do I not own Egypt and all these rivers, and this is you can extrapolate from that the ownership of resources or power and control over anything. So today, we're seeing Venezuela just being taken over like that. They got no weapons of mass destruction. They've got there's no logical or legitimate pretext for them for any kind of engagement with Venezuela other than resources. Similarly with obviously Iraq and these kind of places.
Some people argue that Venezuela, the situation is because I've got a good friend who's from Venezuela at the moment, he's studying in the UK. I'm speaking to him. I feel as though although people are drawing comparisons to Iraq and natural resources, I don't think it's quite,
it's not black and white.
Yeah.
It isn't. It is. I'm not saying that. I'm just kind of, again, I'm making kind of general statements, no doubt. But there's also a projection. One of the things about the example of Fir'aun is that there was a projection of hegemony, of power in all sorts of ways. Someone who declared himself a god and things like this. You can imagine what kind of people were seeing from him, and the reach that he had in terms of people's how people kind of were going to look at him. And similarly with the West, really, that there's a political power, there's a cultural power, there's a financial power, there's all these types of different powers that the rest of the world kind of sees from the outside. But what makes Musa's example, I guess, a bit more pertinent and relevant to us is that he got to see the house of Fir'aun from the inside, whereas everyone else only got to see from the outside. And so while everyone went back to bed, having seen the regalia of Fir'aun and all the power that he had, they all went back to their own tents and their own cabins or wherever they lived. And he went back to the private chambers, effectively. And he got to see Fir'aun as a man, as the human that he really is. And so that kind of also kind of plays on us as well, that although we go out so if I went back to Yemen and there was all this thing like, you got the red passport, you can get anyone, you can do anything, you've got that privilege, and there's I'll talk a bit about that as well. But they base that on what they see and what is projected from the West, but they don't know what it's like on the inside. And so while everyone else sees that, we see the inside and we see the context and we see the issues that there are here. So it's not all the land of milk and honey. You know what I mean? It's not just everyone kind of like kumbaya and everyone kind of getting together.
Money grows on trees and that.
Money grows on trees.
Go
and
to your
all that
relatives
kind of
back home, they ask for like 15 iPhones.
Yeah, exactly. You know what I mean?
For some reason, it reminded me of For example, whenever anybody talks about politics back home, they always say, "Oh, there's so much corruption, this, that," and the way you said that, how Musa alayhi salam saw Fir'aun and he saw the man for who he is, and how people essentially missold the story of how he has palaces and gardens and milk and honey, wherever. For some reason, it just reminded me of House of Cards, where even House of Cards, you see so much corruption with Kevin Spacey when he murders the journalist, and you just think, imagine there's that level of corruption. I know it's fictional. I know we can say it, but there is that bit of imagination. You're thinking, imagine, like, even though they say there's a democracy over here, even though they talk about transparency, but perhaps there is corruption, and on a level that the layman over here just can't see. I mean,
no, perhaps there is. There has to be. I mean, that recent clip of what's it? The new Democrat. I don't know how you pronounce her name. Cortez.
Yes.
Yeah. You see,
where she's talking about.
Where she gives that kind of like analogy, and she goes,
the
"Imagine
legal
if this."
Professors.
Yeah.
That's a very good clip, I think.
Yeah. And so she kind of breaks it down, saying, "Listen, this is our structure. You're saying that it's perceived, but it's legitimately what's happening, and this is how the game is kind of played. Especially, I mean, America's a bit more kind of, everything just supersized compared to what we're experiencing. But that happens, the shenanigans that happen, the rich eating off the poor, the whole austerity situation, the breakdown of families, the lack of spirituality, the fact that we're living in a society which has taken its desire as its Lord, its desires as its Lord, And when you see, subhanAllah, the shaitan made a pledge to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that he said that, and I will change the creation, yeah. يبدلون خلق الله ولا يغيرون خلق الله. So that kind of phrase that, and we see kind of, this recent Parkfield saga here in Birmingham, where you've got an openly gay kind of assistant head teacher who's started this program called No Outsiders, and he's a da'i.
So there's basically a school where an elementary school teacher was telling elementary school, like
primary school.
Primary school.
Sorry.
You moved to this country, you use our lingo.
Primary school teacher is telling some of the students that it's okay for you to be gay. I'm Christian and I'm gay, so you can be Muslim and gay. And it was almost so it felt like he was proselytizing.
He's a da'i, basically.
Yeah,
he's a da'i
for that side.
Yeah, he's a da'i for that side. Not more than that. He's the kids coming back saying, "Mama, I was told that basically there are some girls who are just trapped in boys' bodies, and I can change and all this kind of stuff, and it's okay for me to kind of do this." And so you live in a world where that's happening, and it's not fictional. It's happening right now. People are changing. All these kind of things are happening.
And I think what you're talking about, like, people take their like their desires or their wealth or something as their god, and I think that effectively that happens because a lot of the time we're good at keeping our identities separate, or we'll preserve our Islamic identities and our rituals and things like that, but actually we're falling into the same traps of consumerism and materialism that everyone else is. And there's even within kind of Muslim circles, you see a lot of it's a lot easier to fall into. Basically, like, I feel like it's harder to drop the ball in terms of your kind of ritual worship, etc. But actually, you might have already kind of fallen off the wagon in terms of materialism and consumerism. And
how would you tackle this then? So we're talking about it.
How do you tackle what?
This idea of ideas. That's what essentially is, isn't it? So, for example, Sheikh Taqi talks about in his book, so Nidam al-Islam, he talks about the only plausible way to correct society, if you want to say correction, then would be to change ideas. It starts from ideas, mafahim, innit? So we start from the ideas, we change it, and then over time, when people's ideas change, their actions depend on the ideas, they change as well.
Their understandings.
Yeah. Well, not even understandings. So, like, understandings come from events. So you observe something and you understand it a certain way. Ideas are something else. Ideas are what you want to see in the world as well. So Muslims have the idea of, for example, you talk about the families and austerity. Muslims have the idea of the perfect nuclear family, for example. So in Islam, the nuclear family it's essential to a properly working home, isn't it? And when you develop this idea, as Muslims already have this idea, but when you develop it, your home becomes much better because everyone understands that we have to do this from the idea. Yeah.
Well, it is. I mean, that phrase is a marketplace of ideas, and it's the case of you just have to. The thing is, we have there's especially with the, perhaps Islamic movements and revivalist movements who were perhaps those who kind of were at the forefront of presenting new ideas in the last century. There's almost a level of exhaustion and lack of new thinking about how we, what we consider to be the major monster that basically we have to kind of challenge. Before perhaps it was the end of the Khilafah, and then there was a period of colonization. There was a number of other things kind of taking place that, in South Africa, the Muslims there, they saw apartheid as the monster, so they kind of all rallied around that, and you've had different kind of, like I said, things to kind of target your focus on. And here there's just, whether it's because we've become so desensitized, or we've been stretched so much that we're all kind of fighting our own little battles, not realizing what the big goal is, whatever that big goal is. No one's kind of defined it, maybe. And so everyone's kind of, كُلٌّ يَعْمَلُ عَلَى شَاكِلَتِهِ. Everyone's kind of just working in their own stream.
I feel like in some of the ways, for example, we're very focused on like Islamophobia. Like if you look at what are most Muslims talking about when they come out into the activism or political sphere or something, the main thing just seems to be Islamophobia. And we're so obsessed with not having Islamophobia anymore that you just want Muslim people on the media, even if they have to, even if like they're forced to kind of give up everything they stand for in the process of getting on the media. It's like, as long as we have Muslim faces, Muslim names everywhere, we're reducing Islamophobia, which ultimately is good, and that's the main. And although obviously Islamophobia is terrible, and we need to like obviously
see, a lot of things are terrible. So we can look at one thing and say that's terrible. We should fight against it. But what's that going to do for us? So we have little pockets of little things happening
resistance
here and there.
Yeah.
But then, what in terms like you said, the bigger picture, we have to work towards the bigger picture. But no one's defined the bigger picture.
So my small kind of like input into this is to first and foremost at least kind of reconfigure what our perception is of the world that we're in. And so with what I'm writing basically is to kind of, if you kind of see that paradigm where you are the Musa in the house of the West or in the house of Fir'aun, and you kind of extrapolate some of the lessons from it, what you end up realizing, or what I argue effectively, is that everything that you're experiencing, everything, whether it's positive or negative, Musa alayhi salam killed the man. Allah made sure that that's mentioned, that he's recognizing that was part of his development and experience as well, was for an ultimate goal, which is to be the messenger of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to that context.
So traditionally, have you seen what, like you're writing this book now, have you seen that done anywhere else? Like drawing comparisons to a certain time period to the time of Musa alayhi salam. So in books of tafsir, for example, or scholars writing on the issue, have you seen that?
No, I haven't. But that's not to say I've seen everything. To be honest, I've read tafsir, and I've listened to talks about the example of Musa alayhi salam and things like this, and where there are similarities brought to it, it's not like some unique idea, you know what I mean? But it's a case of just to be honest, it started off more for myself, just kind of formalize my ideas. I was just kind of thinking about it, and I thought maybe I can kind of share this. But directly to answer your point, it's not the first time that people have kind of drawn parallels between Musa alayhi salam and the current world that we're in. And so Sheikh Muhammad Walid Daddu, Hafidhullah, he says that basically from his extrapolation of the story of Musa alayhi salam, he says that power there's always kind of 5 anasir, or kind of factors within the power structure. There's the figurehead, there's the finance head, there's this head, and he mentions 5 of them, and he explains it with the story of Musa. So you've got Fir'aun, then you've got Haman, then you've got the people around him, the ministers, then you've got Qarun, and so he starts kind of taking from that to explain what his position is about how power structures are. But on the power structures thing specifically, and one of the things that needs perhaps more delving into is part of the relationship between Fir'aun and the people around him. Because many times we kind of just go with the idea that Fir'aun had his ministers were all just his people, and what I need to kind of like delve into is really whether they were really his people, whether they were actually Jews themselves. So we know Qarun himself was a Jew. إِنَّ قَارُونَ كَانَ مِنْ قَوْمِ مُوسَى فَبَغَى عَلَيْهِمْ. So he was one of their people, yeah, but he transgressed against them. And so when Musa goes to Fir'aun, Fir'aun says to his people, إِنَّ هَذَا لَسَاحِرٌ عَلِيمٌ يُرِيدُ أَن يُخْرِجَكُم مِّنْ أَرْضِكُم بِسِحْرِهِ فَمَاذَا تَأْمُرُونَ. So he's saying, Musa has come, he's saying, I'm the messenger of Allah, give me Banu Israel. And Fir'aun says, this guy, yeah, he's what?
Come in your country, taking your job.
He wants, no, he's not that. He's not saying that. He's addressing them.
Sorry,
the language there, but it needs more depth. But the language there sounds like Musa, the people around Fir'aun are Banu Israel. The ministers are from Banu Israel. He said, يُخْرِجَكُم مِّنْ أَرْضِكُم بِسِحْرِهِ. He wants to take you out of this land by his magic.
I thought they were Egyptians, so they were Phoenicians or something. So the original Egyptians pre-Bani Israel. I thought those were the people in power, and then Bani Israel were the enslaved. Well,
so this is what. But look at the language that the Quran uses here. So Musa comes in Surah Ash-Shu'ara, where there's a large section of it dedicated to the story of Musa alayhi salam. Musa very clearly states that he is the messenger of Allah and أرسل معنا بني Israel. Give us Bani Israel.
So when Fir'aun's talking to Musa back, who is he looking at? He's
So
his ministers.
So he's speaking to the ministers and he's saying to them, get the translation, he says, إن هذا لساحر عليم. Look at him, he's clearly a well-known, he's a well-versed magician. He wants Musa, يريد أن يخرجكم.
sorry, we're getting some serious
ASMR. That's a nice crunch there.
Yeah. So our listeners will hear Abdul Samir crunching his crisps while we're in the middle of such deep conversation.
So sorry. Basically, I was supposed to go out to eat with Asad, but he snaked me.
What?
Asad snakes everyone, so.
Yeah, I do. So.
But continuing with Fir'aun and.
But this is the point. The point is that when Fir'aun speaks to his ministers who are around him at the time, Surah Ash-Shu'ara states that he addresses them saying, these people, Harun and Musa, they've come to take you out of your lands through this magic. Yeah? But Musa specifically asks for Bani Israel. He didn't ask for anyone else.
So in response, he's saying the ministers are part of Bani Israel as well.
And so,
so he's going to come and take you out, and you don't want to go with him. But why would you want to go with him?
The point isn't specifically that. It's that the people who are in that lofty position with and around Fir'aun are actually, some of them are Banu Israel. That's the point.
So they did make it to those key areas of position.
But then they're like the sellouts, maybe. You get me?
Wow. I'm drawing this comparison. That was like a heat wave now.
Wow.
Huh? And so
it literally just clicked.
It just clicked for me now as well.
Yeah, and so by using that language, what we find is that there were people who made it, and it's always been the case. If you read Asim Qureshi's book, Virtue of Disobedience, it's brilliant, mashallah. He draws this He was the first one who drew my attention to that Qarun was from the people of Musa. Like, I know it's Surah Al-Qasas, I know the surah, I've read it, but subhanAllah, it's the first time I was like, of course, Qarun is...
كان من قوم موسى فبغى عليهم.
This is the wealthy guy who's always associated with Fir'aun, but he's actually from Banu Israel. He's a Jew who transgressed against his own people. He's a self-hater. Yeah.
Billah Faqih, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah, man. There's going to be a whole episode dedicated to that.
Yeah, we need to have an episode to refute this claim.
Or to substantiate it. Yeah.
Just release a PDF. It's fine.
But the point is that there were people from within the Banu Israel who got to that state. Yeah, and so it's a case of, and if you look at what Asim Qureshi writes in his book Virtue of Disobedience, he talks about how beaten people have always, the system has always gathered a few of these people to give them a bit of power, and what they'll do is they subjugate their own people, their own kind, with the small bit of power that you give them, and so this strategy of Fir'aun has it's not unique in our world. It started from somewhere.
Another point that I just picked up in my mind now was that, so when Fir'aun was addressing the ministers, he speaks to them. He doesn't speak to them as in the capacity of ministers. He speaks to them in the capacity of Bani Israel.
No,
so
he's
speaking to them in the capacity of ministers because they're the only ones there. So when Musa comes and says, "I'm the Prophet of Allah and I've come to take Bani Israel out of the lands of you," Fir'aun doesn't talk to Musa, he talks to his ministers. But in the capacity he's talking to his ministers is he wants to take you out of the lands.
Yeah.
So that shows that the ministers still identified as Bani Israel. Can that pull that one as well?
Maybe, but it's not just that they, but it's drawing our attention to the fact that Banu Israel actually got to that level. I was always of the assumption that the best a kid from Banu Israel could get in that time was to become the chief slave of Fir'aun, basically.
Yeah.
They were either killed, or the best you could be was the chief slave. You get me? But
that's what you assume from just like a prima facie reading, don't you?
Yeah,
exactly.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
But that Qarun point is
But
very...
it says, look, قال للملأ حوله. يعني, so here Fir'aun is saying, speaking to the ministers around him, to his counselors around him, this man is a learned sorcerer. Yeah, he means to use his sorcery to drive you out of your land. What do you suggest? Yeah, and Musa's stated aim was to take Banu Israel with him. And so if Fir'aun is taking that statement and implying it onto the counselors around him, that infers that they themselves are Banu Israel, which means that they too have to, this is part of Musa's strategy to take them away from him. And so what you find is that when you again look at the state of Muslims in the West through the lens of Musa, you'll find that maybe you're not saying anything new, but what you're doing is, more than anything, is allowing and inspiring people to kind of just really engage with the Quran again. To kind of say, this is a story that you send your kids to bed with, and he's just not a name that you name your kids after. This is a story, and there's a relevance to it for all time and all place. And we don't just describe the story of Yusuf alayhi salam to someone who's just experienced prison and come out, although everyone who is unjustly imprisoned will always have that relationship with it. That there's something for everyone else in all sorts of contexts and all types of all times, and that's one of my underlying intentions behind kind of giving talks about this and writing this, is to kind of just make people really just do tadabbur, I guess.
So do you think that like for yourself, from your experiences, do you feel as though like a lot of Muslims, when they read Quran, even with the translation, that they don't really there's no
engage on a deeper level.
There's no engagement on a deeper level. Do you feel?
I
as
say
though
to
that's a
myself,
problem?
I'm autopilot most of the time.
Because like madrasas, for example, when you learn Quran, you become a hafiz.
But the focus is almost
on
purely on memorization.
So, for example, you talked about the guy with the what's the app called?
Quran Club.
So Quran Club.
Shout out Quran Club's great.
So a criticism of that was that would further encourage the reading of Quran just for a purely khatam basis in it. So you finish Quran and then you read.
And although that has barakah to it, but that's why they're
so that kind of like it's not a bad thing. It's kind of, do we want to do that to such an extent where we just start reading Quran on a prima facie level, where we just read it for the letters they are, and we don't, like you said, do the
thing is, we have to engage with the Quran on all those fronts. So if someone's going to make it and facilitate for you the basic prima facie reading of the Quran, then you support it and you don't throw shubha or doubt on it.
Should we have
you support that?
Other kind of projects aiming at different facets of reading?
Without a doubt.
Shout out to Quran Club, though. They have a tafsir aspect, so they have translation, like multiple translations and tafsir. Just throwing
no,
that.
Barakallah feek. I mean, it's an app close to my heart.
Are you getting paid for this, Saqib?
No, I'm not getting paid for any of this.
Are you sure?
So when are you looking to release your book?
To be honest, it's been, I started writing it a while back, to be honest.
A bit like this podcast.
But yeah. But to be honest, it's sometimes you gotta push something out there to kind of force yourself to a deadline.
Yeah. Have you come up with a name yet?
No, I haven't.
The Middle West would be a perfect name.
The Middle West.
That would actually be an amazing name for the book.
Yeah.
Because Egypt is the middle. No, it's not.
It's not.
Dunya, what are you on about? Oh, Cairo is.
Yeah.
Cairo is yeah. That's, you can just call it Dunya. Mother West, Mother.
Yeah, nah, it doesn't work. That's so we can tell. But to be honest, most of the time I do talks about this kind of topic. So I've got a Forces weekend next month, and it's going to be kind of around this, about responsibility and about.
Forces Midlands are having a retreat next month, I think. I'm not trying to plug in Forces.
That's our third or fourth plug this episode, so I think this is going to be a regular thing. Alhamdulillah, great efforts going on. We can plug them all.
Well done, Forces. Sorry.
No, but what I'm saying is that most of this is kind of done in that kind of way. But I am committed to wanting to kind of write this down, even if it's just another 20 odd pages left or something.
Would it be like a normal size book or a thick, juicy book?
No.
Like this one right here.
Oh yeah.
Well done, nations.
I mean, would Adam Smith actually? You know what? He's made it.
Isn't he dead?
Yeah,
Long,
he is.
long time ago.
I was gonna say he didn't intend for his book to become
The capitalism manual of the world.
yeah.
Is that the philosopher Adam Smith?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was the baker Adam Smith.
Sorry? Was that supposed to be a joke? Oh, it was a terrible joke, that.
Crickets.
Well, obviously it's terrible now that you made it terrible. Abdullah, one of the other questions we really wanted to ask you was, obviously you've done a lot of work around Birmingham, different masajid, different communities. Can you give us like a little kind of map around of Birmingham, all the
No-go zones.
No-go zones.
Where are the no-go zones?
You know what?
First and foremost, is it true that there are no-go zones as reported by Fox News?
Yeah, there are.
SubhanAllah.
No,
That's probably 'cause they're
Birmingham.
pedestrianised.
You know what? To be honest, in 2016,
All of Birmingham's a no-go
No,
zone.
but there's a low emission zone coming, which will actually be a
yeah,
no-go
they'll
zone.
definitely, and it catches Central Mosque in it, so
Oh,
no one can drive
dear.
their car into it. Yeah.
That's amazing, though, isn't it?
Unless you have like a new diesel or something, new diesel petrol.
Can Michael go in there?
Basically, I think it's a car post 2015 or 2016 or something like that. Yeah, that those cars are allowed in.
No, but actually, because Birmingham has a very diverse and interesting Muslim community as well. And I mean,
Oh, yeah,
Where were you born in Birmingham?
He
In
wasn't.
Marston Green Hospital,
Oh, you were?
which is in.
Not the hospital. I mean, the
I'm
area.
going straight to.
you asked a
Polish.
pretty specific
Yeah,
question.
very
Said,
specific
where in
question.
Birmingham were you
The
born?
hospital no longer stands. But I've been in Sparkhill. I've been in I'm in Smallheath. I think I grew up initially in Alum Rock for a bit, and then moved
Alum Rock.
and then I got promoted to Smallheath.
Promoted?
And then, yeah, man. And then moved up to Sparkbrook, and
Yeah,
then
I'm
to
a Londoner
and then,
here,
and
so
then
I'm
to
just
Hall
hearing-
Green.
I was born in
I'm
Birmingham,
hearing
actually.
dump after
Oh,
dump
yeah?
after
I was born in
dump.
Handsworth.
Mabruk, mashallah,
Yeah.
mashallah,
We
fantastic.
need to keep this.
I got
area.
promoted to Manchester.
When we come to London, we'll
Listen.
go after some of your areas.
Listen, yeah.
But you know that news about the Fox News thing in 2016 in Hajj, we were going to the Medina, some university, some Islamic museum, and this guy, as we were walking down, I got speaking to him. He's from California, and I told him I'm from Birmingham. Oh, that's the place that like it's only Muslims, right? I was thinking, wow, it's reached you, but yeah, it is. It is all Muslims. I'm not joking,
Did
but we make about a
Darul
third.
Islam.
Did you know?
It's
we
like
make
27, 30%, something
Yeah,
like that?
almost 300,000.
Wow.
About 300,000. And still, man, like, I remember, you know what? Birmingham has a rep of everyone hating each other. And I was listening to a talk by Nouman Ali Khan. He gave it in Kuwait, I think it was. And he was talking about the shaitan and the devil, or Adam, the story of Adam and the shaitan and things like this. And before he got to his bit, he started talking about how people hate each other or something. And he goes, you know what? There's this place in the UK called Birmingham, and everyone hates each other. That's an international arena. That's an international speaker. That's being spoken about in Kuwait. You got Mohammed Hoblos, the Australian.
Yeah.
The first time he came a few years back, he was talking about how the brothers who were taking me around, they were saying, they took him down Coventry Road, and they're like, look, there's a masjid, 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 thinking, check us out, man, we got a masjid everywhere, we got this place on lock. And then he goes, why do these people hate each other? And he just got it straight away. You know what I mean?
That's why, there'll be like 4 masjids on the same block.
But it happens. I mean, up north as well. There's one guy who showed me a photo. It's a street. Yeah, it's just normal terrace street. There's a Brevi mosque, and then there's a Dubani mosque.
So
right at the end.
my town, in outside of Manchester, it's a small town, but there's a good 20 mosques in the town. And the problem I was talking with another brother about was that when janazas happen, this is actually quite sad. When janazas happen in the community, the mosque who endorse the person, like their beliefs, will announce the janaza. So, for example, if a Barelvi person dies, the Salafi masjid most likely won't announce the janaza because that's taken upon the Barelvi masjid. And I think that's quite sad, to be honest with you.
Yeah, especially with it's sad anyway, but with janaza it's extra
It's quite divisive as well.
Yeah.
On death.
The thing is, so I come from Tower Hamlets in London. A huge Bengali population. About 40% of the borough is Bengali.
Including yourself.
Can I just say Pakistani? Anywho, a population of about 40% that are Bengali, so it's a huge chunk. And a friend of mine from Ireland came over once, and aside from the cheap chicken and chip shops, I was just showing him around. I'm like, look, there's a masjid there, there's a masjid there. In like a 1 mile radius, there's like 15 masjids in my to my house. My local mosque is like a 2-minute walk. East London Mosque is like 10-minute walk from my house, and that's like my 5th local mosque. In terms of, I was like getting really happy, saying, "Oh, look how many mosques we have over here, and this that." He shoots me down one question. He's like, "Yeah, but is this actually good? Does this mean that there's more division?" And it got me thinking straight away that, subhanAllah, that's so true. And the worst thing of all is that the division isn't even based upon ideology.
But saying that in London, a lot of the, so like East London Mosque, every time I've been to, like even at like a random salah time, it's full. It's full all the time. So actually, maybe the community actually needs that many massages.
No, I wouldn't say so. Yes, East London Mosque is full, but it's not all the time. Only some of the time, to be honest. And it's not that they need the space. What happens is there's lots of divisions usually within the committees themselves in terms of genuine just.
Look at that mosque in Wembley. Have you seen the videos around
the
mosque?
video of people basically beating
in
up
Wembley?
the committee.
Yeah, you've seen that.
There's one in Birmingham. There's one in Birmingham.
No, look.
No. Listen.
Let's focus all the way on
our guns are on London now. Okay. Our guns are on
Birmingham
London.
alone. let's finish off with London, and then.
But there, literally, the committee wanted to kick out the imam, but the imam has been there for like 20 years, and so like generations have kind of just loved this guy. He's lovely qari, and he kind of engages with everyone really well, and the committee don't like him anymore, and so there's a massive bust up. There's literally people fighting in the masjid. In fact, there's 2 salah. There's 2 jama'ahs for every place, so the committee will have their own jama'ah. But the thing is, we say subhanallah to stuff like this, and it really gets us. But there was a time in the ummah where at the Kaaba itself, there were 4 jama'ahs for every prayer.
Oh wow!
There were 4 jama'ahs for every prayer at the Haram in Mecca. So the Shafi'is would pray first. Usually that's we kind of pray at the beginning. And then the Hanafis were at the end of it. So the Hanbalis probably, and the Malikis, and then the Hanbalis. And for each salah, can you imagine that?
It still happens. I was speaking to a brother like last year where he said to me that I know somebody who went to Mecca and they didn't want to pray behind the Imam, so they have their own congregation.
Yeah.
There's a few people who do that, but they do it on their own.
Yeah, but when the guards see it...
Because especially like... Because I've had a few encounters with quite a few Barelvis in Mecca.
He's like this endangered species. I've had a few encounters with a few Brailleys in Mecca.
Okay.
He goes into David Attenborough mode as I kind of walk up to him.
But I would say though, they're like, we love our Braillewy brothers. They do some of the best work. They have some of the best masajid.
Plugging for Braillevis now.
Sorry,
a plug for Braillevis now.
A deserved
plug for Braillevis. I need to think of some effort, and then I'll ask.
But you know what? You know on that. Sorry, side note. But there's something that Imam Hassan al-Banna says, which is quite powerful, and it got me really thinking about when I was initially kind of just reading about him and his movement, and it was a case of he was really ahead of his time. When you talk about you want to create the perfect Muslim, I mean, if you were to kind of do it in a kind of a cookbook kind of analogy, you'd get a hint of a Salafi, a hint of a Sufi, a dash of a this and a dash of a that, and you'll mix it up and you'll make this, But he kind of clocked onto that quite quickly. And, when he talks about the movement that he started, Ikhwan al-Muslimin, what did he say? He said, we're a Sunni movement, we're a Salafi, Tasawwuf is a major part of us, we're a Tablighi group. So he kind of took everything that everyone was doing out there. And because what everyone does effectively is they take one aspect of the Prophet's example and they kind of just go with that, whether it's Tasawwuf, whether it's Tabligh, whether it's whatever. And the idea is to kind of say the Prophet was the complete. And so for us to kind of create the perfect da'i, which is, and effectively to take on the responsibility of being the messenger of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, is to kind of endeavor to kind of bring these kind of aspects, the good of them, into that one individual, into your own self, and so that you focus on all these kind of things. And so while we're, and it's not just a cursory comment really, but just on the back of kind of praising some of the work that the Brelvi community do, and some of the things that you get from some of the mashayikh of like Sheikh Muhammad Aslam and these guys, well, it really kind of imbues you with a love of the Prophet ﷺ again, and that it really hits your heart. And it's important that you kind of وَلَا تَبْخَسُوا النَّاسَ أَشْيَاءَهُمْ, you got to give credit where it's due, and more than that, because they're your Muslim brothers, it's not, and these are teachers and learned people, so it's important that we kind of make that very apparent and try to kind of not bring everything down to a lowest common denominator, because that kind of makes things a bit, sets the bar a bit low, but at least to kind of appreciate that there is khair in this ummah, and it doesn't have to effectively come just from one jama'ah or from one leader, from one whatever. And if you appreciate that and you have that as a kind of an understanding and a fahm initially, then it allows you to kind of break these divides, so you can comfortably go into a Sufi masjid and pray. You can comfortably go and sit down in a bayan by the tabligh. You can comfortably go to this masjid and that masjid, and you can take away what you don't agree with. You disagree. You agree to disagree on certain aspects, but you kind of take the khair, and you realize there is so much khair in this ummah, and so we got to inspire. And kind of really teach that.
I think that's easier said than done with a lot of communities.
I was once so there was
a lot of this is all aspirational stuff. You know what I mean?
There was also a community leader who once said that if things can stay as it is at the moment in terms of the Muslim community, okay, we can still have the Sufis or the Barelvis or the Salafis or the Ikhwanis, whatever or not. But if everyone was to be united under one banner, that's the kind of the perfect model. Like you're saying
but that's the fundamental question is that we say that, but in the past 1400 years, we've not really been united under one banner. Since the Umayyad dynasty fell, you had an Umayyad caliphate out in Spain, and then you had an Abbasi caliphate, and then later on, when the kind of other empires built up and other dynasties built up, so Muslims have always been having these little pockets. I'm not saying that we have to do that but I'm just saying that.
No, but it's not a case of talking about in a political unity, or that would be otherwise, although that would be great, yeah. And you're right. The majority of the Muslim ummah has been the case of everyone's kind of just setting up their own little fiefdoms and whatever it is, and that's just the way of the world. But it's more a case of appreciating that everyone has a stake in this Islam. You know what I mean? And maybe it's a case of not lowering the standard, but at least setting a standard for making the jama'ah of the Muslims as wide as possible, to include them. Yeah. So Ibn Taymiyyah one time he says, Ahlul Qibla, you know what I mean? And so who's Ahlul Qibla? Even the Shia Ahlul Qibla, because they praise, you know what I mean? And so you kind of expand it to the maximum extent that the Sharia allows, so that you can kind of bring in so many people. And it's not, like I said, necessarily a political decision, a political unity, but at least one where you appreciate the person without kind of having to go to fists.
Do you believe that political unity is much easier than, theological one?
On single issues, yeah, but not generally speaking. Single issues, we'll all rally around Palestine. We'll all rally around, relationship and sexual education in schools. We'll all rally around, single issue, the Iraq war or something like that. But there's too many snakes, and there's too many. It's too messy. Politics, man. It's a cursed arena.
That just reminded me of Ertugrul, because the whole show is just like too many snakes. There's a snake here, a snake pops up there. But anyways, we can, mashallah, with Abdullah, every time we sit down, it's very insightful. I can't believe Abdul Samir was about to ruin that great moment of insight that we had with his.
I'm very sorry.
ASMR. But Jazakallah khair for coming. We look forward to listening to your book. We look forward to having you back on the podcast to discuss more stuff. And with that, from the Middle West Podcast, you can find us on Twitter at the Middle West PC. You can email us at middlewestpc@gmail.com, and you will be able to like us on Facebook as soon as Asad creates our Facebook page.
Like, subscribe and share.
Not a fan of Zuckerberg, so I won't be doing that anytime soon.
Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.